Welcome to the Enchanted Earth podcast, where you will hear stories of nature with the power to transform our lives. These sacred stories are begging to be shared now. So listen in as my guest today shares one of their own. Welcome, everybody. Today we have with us Julia Plevin Oliansky, and let me tell you a little bit about Julia. Julia is an author of Healing Magic of Forest Bathing and founder of the Forest Bathing Club. Since 2015, she's been guiding individuals, groups, and organizations through healing experiences in nature. With over a decade of experience in brand and innovation strategy, she's also the founder of Heal Yourself, People, Earth, or HYPE, a climate creative agency for those who are ready to put the planet at the center of their purpose. Julia has a BA from Dartmouth, an MFA from the School of Visual Arts, and training in numerous healing modalities. And finally, Julia lives in Ashland, Oregon. So thank you so much for joining me, Julia.
Yeah, and thanks for making this happen, Maureen.
Yay! Yay! So, I understand that you've been doing forest bathing practices for quite a while now. And in fact, you were doing it before it really became a popular practice. Do you have any particular experience that brought you to do forest bathing to begin with?
Yeah, so funny enough, when I was living in New York City and getting my MFA, at the School of Visual Arts, we our whole second year was working on a thesis, and it's such an amazing opportunity because you really get to choose a topic you're interested in and then explore it from different angles and have, professors kind of like, pushing you further, going deeper and having that space to be held. And um when I kept digging and digging, my thesis really became all about the mental health effects of being disconnected from nature,
Yeah.
which, you know, there's many, all I think mental health effects, all mental health issues, and then the way to heal, which was always to reconnect to nature. So, sorry, for there's this Glenn Albrecht, who's a researcher um, in Australia, and he has done a lot of work around these mental health effects, and he has one called solastalgia, and it's like a loss of solace for a place that you used to find comfort in, and it can happen because of climate change. It can be because of a forest got logged. It can happen because a suburb went up, or many ways this happens to our earth. Um, and the way that to heal is to reconnect to nature. And so I spent a while trying to make like solastalgia happen, and it's just, like hashtag solastalgia, and it just wasn't really catching on. Um, and then I just kind of switched to forest bathing, which is like the same, this concept of going in nature as a group to be into, and that just took off. So I think that's the power too of like branding or naming practices. And I think solastalgia was like, oh, where people couldn't really understand or get behind forest bathing, even if you hadn't heard of it, evoked something where people are like, I want it, I want that.
Right. So, how did you find that term forest bathing? Because, like I said, this was kind of really on the cutting edge before it became a popular thing.
Yeah. I think I must have, 'cause I was diving deep into this space with research, came across it somewhere, in the depths. It wasn't yet like, in magazines or really on the news, but there was, it's a practice that's been around in Japan since the 80s. So it hadn't written about, just like not for the, everyday, not for the public.
Wow. Yeah. So, you're talking about the mental health effects of being disconnected from nature. I would just love for you to share a little bit about that research. Like, what things did you find were maybe a symptom of disconnection?
Yeah. Well, this is also funny because it's not funny, but it all my research was before, like nowadays you can have like ecotherapist or like a, like a eco-aware therapy. And that really is a pretty new thing, um, of therapists understanding that a lot of people's stress, anxiety, depression is related to, you know, to our environment, um, to like what's happening to our world and to nature. And so much of that therapy is actually about going back to nature and like not just sitting on the couch, but being closer to closer to the earth, like taking a walk in the woods, finding that connection and that solace in nature. Cause that's the thing. It's like, um, when I was doing that research, I found it in myself, like, so deeply, and I think that's kind of when, you've hit on something, it's like, "Oh my god, this is naming something I didn't know I had." Um, Eco-anxiety is a term. Eco-paralysis is when these, feelings around, like, what's happening, climate change, the environment are so intense and overwhelming that you just are paralyzed and don't know what to do. Um Generational environmental amnesia is one I also really like, this idea that environments degrades being degraded every generation, but only we don't we have that amnesia because we only understand our own, like, "Oh, like, when I grew up, it was like this, and it was better," but when your great-great-grandparents grew up, it was a different way. One really healing thing for me is having grown up in the suburbs of DC that felt very, like, concrete where, I remember doing environmental studies class, and we, like, went on the Anacostia River, and they pulled up, like, fish that had, mutations from pollution, and then moving to Southern Oregon where actually you can, like, swim in the creeks and, get water from a spring. It, like, felt kind of like going backwards in time to me of like, "Oh my gosh," like a cleaner earth, which is not most people's experience.
When you were telling me about coming up with this idea for the thesis, I was wondering if you had read Richard Loeb's book, The Last Child in the Woods,
Mhm.
as so many of the people on this podcast have.
Yeah, I mean, I think that awareness from, Richard Louv's book, it's definitely been in the public
Yes.
parlance, like, helping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're talking about ecotherapy, eco-psychology, and I think the first time I was introduced to that concept was in a book called Voice of the Earth by Theodore Roszak.
Mhm.
And in the subtitle is the word eco-psychology, I think. And that just, oh, when I read that book, I found myself getting so angry.
Mhm.
And my eyes were opened to what's been going on for, a few thousand years with patriarchy.
Mhm.
I can imagine
Yeah.
it does bring up a lot of anger and grief and really hard emotion.
Exactly, yeah, and then, I think, like, Joanna Macy's work, I've had so many, like, seminal teachers, there's, like, this work of, like, because of there's so much pain, right, that we all feel. And it's almost like it's too much to actually feel that pain and live your life. So, like, to kind of like get through, you have to put up blocks and you have to, but then like you can get to a point where you are so closed off, your heart's so closed off that you're actually not feeling anything. And, it's like you have to feel enabled in order to heal, So, like, when you first do start hearing about all this stuff, it's like the feeling is so overwhelming. There's so much grief. And then the further you get into at least for me, I found like along the journey, there's a lot of joy and it's like your capacity for joy and love is like in relationship to your capacity to hold, the grief and the sorrow. So it's like once you open up, you can, feel like life is actually that much more beautiful and multicolored and,
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just wondering like what what actually led you to do that particular thesis?
I guess my own experience growing up. So I was diagnosed with Lyme disease, chronic Lyme disease. in kind of like beginning of college, which was like a culmination of like years of trying to understand these symptoms I had that like I just didn't feel right. No doctors could understand, anxiety, depression, like hormone imbalance, just like all of this stuff that, well, on the surface, there's another book that's written about my uh, high school days called The Overachievers. And I'm actually the main character, Julie, the superstar. And I'm, the 4.0 GPA, the captain of the cross country team, but like dealing with all the, but like she gets into a little bit, but not fully the like, all of the inks and the stuff that I was dealing with and the sickness. And anyways, I was finally diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease, put on antidepressants and antibiotics, and just really sick. Um, and my own, at some point, I realized like I didn't want to be sick anymore. And I started to focus, and this was like pretty young, I think to come into stuff like, in college, we're focusing on healing. So different healing, learning different healing modalities, just like kind of training my mind, realizing that how powerful our minds are and that we can, go down these dark rabbit holes and like make this darkness a reality, or we can choose the opposite and tell different stories. Um, so I started training my mind to tell different stories, and it led me down a path of, both dealing with a lot of like illness and a lot of healing. Um, so actually, by the time I was in grad school, I had a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of digestive issues. I couldn't eat pretty much anything. So I started working with some great Ayurvedic healers um, to restore the like balance and and Ayurveda is an ancient science of, you know, healing and harmony with nature. And so I think that was like, it's always been like what I've been doing on the side while, doing these like, I'm an MFA program, but really it's like this all of like my own personal journey of healing. And I think that combined with being in New York City, a place where like I was just like craving that nature connection and, trying to understand that it's everywhere. Like, okay, you don't have to like escape the city to get, you can, the Gowanus Canal, a super fun site, is actually nature, and the power of regeneration in places and the healing that it brings to heal places.
Wow. Yeah. So it kind of brought you from Dartmouth in Vermont, New
New
Hampshire,
Hampshire.
New
Yeah.
Hampshire, um, to the city, New York City, the heart of New York City, to kind of really open up to the concept of nature as a healer.
Yeah, exactly. As the ultimate healer. And kind of understanding along the way is like why do I always feel better in nature? Like why does a hike make me feel better? Or why did surfing or what, rock climbing? I'd always loved nature in that way. It's like being outside, I always knew I felt better, but it was like understanding why, and um
Yeah. So just getting back to your childhood in DC. So, again, another urban area, um, that experience of seeing the fish when you were in school. Do you think that is one of those experiences from childhood that foreshadowed your thought pattern of what you would eventually be doing?
that's a great question. I never would have thought about it until that way until just right now. But like, I think, of course, that the fact that that is a memory that I, held in somewhere that, um, uh, yeah, I think, talking about like that book, Last Child in the Woods, I think all children have an inherent connection and love of nature. It's our biophilic nature. I think all humans do. Of course, as adults, if you haven't had those experiences as kids of like connection to nature, you might not ever like have that place in your heart or your mind or physically to go back to, and you not, you ever like felt that connection to nature, and that can cause a whole other host of, health and mental and physical health issues later on. But I definitely was a kid who loves and found a lot of solace in nature and love nature and like wanted to study environmental studies, but never quite, but I remember taking like environmental studies course and it was about like this thing called climate change where like, the CO2 was rising. And I was like, this is interesting, but wasn't, you know, what I really wanted to be studying. And I think, had I found like shamanic studies or, things like that early on, I would have been a lot more into it.
Right, right, right. Because this was all like the left brain, the rational. You really were craving more of that soul, deep, feminine, intuitive connection.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Wow. Yeah. So, so I know I interviewed you for my book, and you shared a couple of stories there. I would love to open this to see whatever story as an adult or a child it's popping up for you that you might want to share with us today.
Sure. Yeah, I can tell you a recent story if that's
Oh, I love it.
okay. So we were talking before we started recording that I had done a like weekend long School of Wise Innovation Nature Connection experience for and I'm supporting a friend in facilitating this in around Mount Shasta, um, which is a powerful power. The power is the power spots. Um, and it's at the Headlers Outdoor School, held by which is this guy Tim Corcoran, who awesome elder of nature connection and earth tending. And I was mentioning that I wanted to, while I was facilitating, I also, because I had been going through a lot in my personal life, I wanted to give myself like to the experience fully. And so, we had our sat around the fire sharing our intentions. And I shared about that, I had recently, well, like when we were talking about doing this experience, I went to visit the land and actually at the time I had my toddler with me and I was pregnant and I was like, I don't know how I could possibly hold space for, this people going through this kind of process. I'm holding space in my body physically. I have a toddler. I have a full-time job. This is just like, just not the right timing. And um, so, but then in the like months after that, first I had a miscarriage, and my job gave me like 2 weeks off, to heal from that. And I had a vacation, so I was gone for 3 weeks, and I come back. It's like Monday, 9 a.m. meeting with my boss, and there's an HR person on the call. I'm like, what is this about? And I got laid off, along with half the company. So going from it was just like so obvious, like like I think sometimes there's like subtler ways that, life communicates with us, but just those two events right in front of right together really felt like, okay, I'm being, asked to redirect or to create, there's something else that wants to come through, some other creation. And actually did an advanced combo training. So combo is another, the frog secretion from the Amazon is another forest medicine practice that I practice and serve, and I did so I did advanced training in that, and then I was at the I shared a bit of that at the as in the intention circle, and then it's one of the like main events of the weekend. This guy Tim led a sweat lodge, and the sweat lodge is like he even said it's like going into the womb of the earth, and when you like come out, you're reborn. Um, to the earth. And so we sat in there, like, I love a sweat lodge. So I'm like right front and center, um, the first couple rounds, and it's super intense. And he actually lets you get out between like the halfway through to jump in the creek, which isn't necessarily a traditional practice, but he's like, this is a school. Um, so I jumped in the creek. That was amazing. Then when I came back in, I was like, I don't want to be in the front and center anymore. And I kind of put myself in the back and I was lying down and I really felt like the rounds were like burst contractions, like so intense, and then like the door would open and you'd have a little bit of like a reprieve, like space between the contraction and then like, you crawl out at the end. And I really did feel like a rebirth to um of myself, like in connection to the earth, to my work. And so that was only, that was maybe a month and a half ago at this point, and I've definitely felt, a shift in um how I'm like creating and working and um so that was a very powerful experience.
Wow. That is so beautiful. And I just want to say I'm so sorry about your loss. And it is, I guess, such a gift to be able to have the perspective of kind of like seeing from the eagle's perch the events in our lives and kind of a higher purpose for them. It definitely can help us get through that day-to-day grief process of loss and letting go. I love sweat lodges, and I would just love for you to maybe just kind of describe the actual intensity, the physical experience of a sweat lodge for those of us, our viewers or listeners that have never experienced one before.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's almost hard to describe, but I will try my best. So it's you how many people are and you go into the lodge and um they they place these like stones that have been heated on the fire and they'll say like this is not a sauna, this isn't a resort, this is a it's a rite of passage. It's it's not meant to be easy. It's meant to challenge. It's meant to put you, over your edge. It's a space to bring your prayers. It's like I think in talking about like modern Western medicine, we think that we can take a pill or like that some doctor is like we kind of outsource our healing, like doctor take care of me or like pill fix me. Um, in, more traditional, indigenous, shamanic ways of healing, you have to heal yourself and you have to go through, trying experiences that like, you have to really bring your prayers and overcome something. Um, and and like all of the healing work I do, it's like, especially it's combo different story, but like the stronger your prayer, the stronger the, medicine, the experience. So, um, but yeah, so you're sitting in there with these hot, stones, and then they'll sprinkle some herbs on it, and um, the door will shut, so it's completely dark. You're like in this cave, you can't really see anything. You kind of can feel people around you, but you can't see anyone. Um, and the leader, in this case, it's Tim, and he had um, songs. He would sing. He has his tools, his feather, his drum. Um, And you're just singing these and, like, even if you don't know the words or it's another language, you kinda just, like, have to sing along to, like, survive almost, like, um, and you're carried through the experience in that way, and then, I don't know, maybe it's, like, 3 or 4 songs around, and then, like, the door will swing open, and that's, like, a little bit of coolness will come in, but then they bring in new hot stones, right? So it's, like, it's hotter and hotter, um, and yeah, it's crazy powerful. I know.
Yeah, I mean, and as the name suggests, it is a huge sweat, purging of toxins, right, in a physical sense. And I recall being told before I went into one that you're going to have the urge to just run out of there.
Yeah,
And it can get very strong because it is such an intense heat that it's hard to breathe.
yeah, yeah, and you don't think you're gonna make it, like, yeah, you're sweating from every crevice of your body, um, your clothes are, if you're like, yeah, you're soaked through, yeah, exactly. And that urge of like just wanting it to be over, or wanting to run away, or, like that's, you really have to face yourself in those moments, I feel like.
Yeah. So when you actually emerge finally from the full sweat, what are you experiencing?
Um, I mean, yeah, it's like you're in another realm. It almost, like it's like a clean slate, another realm, like it does feel like a rebirth. I jump back into that creek, and I have this like dress that I wear as like a sweat dress. So I'm like, it's just like in the dress in the creek. And then, but it's cold and it's nighttime, so like it's been a freezing creek. So then you sit by the fire and that experience of like having been so hot and then being shivering and, you're just like, it's so elemental. And so much clarity, I think. Like it really feels like things have just been like burned out of you.
Yeah. And I think visually, that is one of the things that really struck me was that everything looked different.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. In forest bathing, I'll often do like a start off with like helping people, going through a practice to awaken your senses. And so you um have everyone look around, like imagine this is your last chance to look on planet Earth, and then you close your eyes and then when you open them again, it's like as if for the first time. And even just saying that is powerful, like seeing everything. But so we can, yeah, create those experiences, but just like so we take in so much of our information visually. Especially in our culture of like social media, screens, everything is so visually, like that's our visual, like our dominant sense. And so when you close your eyes and you let your other senses kind of like tune in and wake up, it's powerful. But then, even just like we don't even think about what we see and like looking at it with new eyes, with, in a different way, just it's so powerful.
And how about the sense of sound? Like in the sweat lodge, that's also intense, right? The
Mm-hmm.
beating of the drums and the singing.
Mm-hmm.
There's like this vibration swirling around this
Mm-hmm.
cave-like space. Wow, talking about it, I'm like, I'm really craving it. I haven't done it in quite a few years.
Yeah, maybe there's one coming your way, but
Maybe. And it is that time of year. I've only done them in the fall, I think.
yeah. A couple years ago, my husband was sick. He had like uh, pneumonia, and wasn't getting better. And I was like, we have to find a sweat lodge. We have to go to a sweat. And um, uh, we went down because we only live like an hour from Mount Shasta. So went down and did one with the local indigenous group. And I don't know if that's what healed him, but I'm a believer in that. Like it is medicine. Like it is really, it's healing on the like, spiritual, metaphysical ways of, but like I think it also, I was just like, I was so sure he needed to go to a sweat lodge in that moment.
Yeah. Mm. So the last time we were going to talk, I wrote a few questions down, and maybe it was one of your Instagram posts. I saw something about trusting nature.
Mhm.
Trusting nature. Does that ring a bell to you?
Um, I mean, it's the concept it does. I guess on the one hand, it's like easy to say trust nature when things are going smoothly in your life. Um, it's a lot harder to trust nature when they're not going your way, to trust that, you know, things are working in in service of a higher good for you and for, your timeline and the planet and all that. Um, Especially with all of the stuff that we see in the world, like what does that mean to trust nature and amongst so much, grief and atrocity and, disaster. So maybe it's a survival technique too, you know? Like the whole, like the universe has your back. Does the universe really have your back? Or does it just make life a lot better to believe that the universe has your back? Like I don't know, but I'd rather believe that it does. And trusting nature is like it's such a huge concept, honestly. Like there's um in an era of so much information, of so much noise, what does it mean to like where do you find your truth? Where do you find your guidance? Where do you find your um direction? And that is, you know, like being in nature to me is truth, is where we find it.
Yeah. And do you have any thoughts on why going out into nature is such a healing tonic for our modern lives?
Yeah, that's like exactly what I, first started is the why. Cause I think um how does it work? Why does it work? And um there's nowadays so much research around, pieces of it. It can never grasp at the whole, but there's this idea of um, they've done studies where people who like look at a wall and people who like look up at a tree, the ones who look at a tree feel a greater sense of awe. And then, the feeling of awe brings about greater like positivity and collaboration and, all these like um, positive emotions. There's the this, idea that for 99.9% of our human history, we spend our days walking on our earth, walking, sleeping. Everything was connected to the earth, and now we can go so long without actually ever having like physically like our feet connected to the earth. And that's the thing about like when we have our feet on the earth, there's like a energy from the earth that rises up, and it that can be really healing for anything from like, PMS to jet lag to, just like it's just an energy from the earth that we can connect into. Um, there's the negative ions that are in the forest, like that are in, the waves and the ocean. Negative ions bring positive vibes, as they say, so there's that. There's the forest bathing was actually the first research was around the phytoncides. The basically it's like an essential oil that trees release as a way to protect themselves. But in this reciprocal relationship that we have with nature, when we inhale the phytoncides, it has all sorts of benefits for us. Um, so there's so much research on that level these days, which is really cool. Because I think, like, when I first started forest bathing, I had to explain to people why they should go forest bathing. Like, what, like, why, how is this working? Why is it good to be in nature? And, like, especially the, like, doing nothing or the just mindful, and it's being, because, like, it's not about going for a hike. It's not about moving fast. It's about slowing down and being in your senses and more fully soak it in. And, um, so now I think there's a general consensus and understanding on the benefits of nature.
Yeah, yeah. And I know all that intellectual knowledge, the data helps a lot of people who may be skeptical to
Mhm.
understand like the physical experience of being in nature and how it benefits us, how it reduces heart rate. And and then when you introduce them through the invitations in a forest bathing experience, it can hopefully spark a little from here, like a little,
Exactly.
like, oh, what was that? What am I feeling?
Yeah.
I just heard a bird, and all of a sudden I'm thinking it's time for me to leave my job, or people get these downloads that
Yeah.
sometimes are just so um, wonderful in a group to hear these experiences
Exactly.
that surprise them, completely surprise them. Do you have any particular experience of something like that? Having
Yeah. I
someone,
mean, one of the things about forfeiting is yes, you can do it on your own and but when it's in a group going through that process, it's that much more powerful because it's the reconnection is to yourself, to each other, and to nature. So it's like three levels of which we're disconnected, from our own selves, from like people on a deep level, and from the planet. So the reconnection really needs to hit at those three levels. And so people I always like that, when I plan a forest bath or experience to have those three levels and time where people one-on-one with nature, time when you can one-on-one with each other, time to share back in a group. And it's always about like you have that little practice and then you share back. And sometimes there's a little story, sometimes it's a couple words. But that practice also of like having a talking piece and getting to pass it around and you know being heard in that way too is really healing to be heard in that way and really healing to hear in that way. And it's non-judgmental, just open, safe space. But I'm always shocked, there's like a part of me that like I would bring out, venture capitalists or billionaires. I've done fourth class with billionaires. And I'm like, surely they're like, um, gonna this isn't gonna work on them, or they're gonna just like be cynical or critical or never. I always have people who, um, I'm like, I ask people to talk to a tree and they'll do it. And like, sometimes there's some giggles, but I'm not, and I'm like, you might think I'm crazy, but just humor me and try, and it's just amazing that it works on everyone, and, people might say like meditation's not for me or yoga is not for me, but no one can say nature is not for me because we are nature. That is, you know.
I love that nature's not for me. Yeah, such an era in our thinking.
Yeah. So I've had, I guess I'm always shocked at how powerful experiences people can have. Um, I did one recently, and it was someone who had won to like a forest bath at an auction. And so it was her and two of her friends, and they live in like a senior living retirement, community. Um, and I took they met me and in the forest, we had a forest bath. And I guess what was so beautiful for me was to be able like they're a different part in their life, but we had this joint powerful connection because there's no age in nature, right? Nature is ancient and it's new and it's all together. It's dying and it's birthing and it's like all of these timelines are happening in one place at once. So it's like we are the same. It's just a great, powerful way to connect to people who you might think like, oh, that's their thing. I'm this, but you just realize that how connected we all are.
Yeah, and isn't that interesting too? I got the word judgmental. We can perhaps judge somebody by the way they show up as, oh yeah, this person's never going to get it. They're like you said, they're totally. I might do that. I might say, yeah, they're super disconnected. They're going to be like you rolling their eyes through this whole thing. And it's usually those people have, in my experience, have the most powerful
Mhm.
kind of
Mhm.
mini awakenings, say. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean that all of a sudden they're going to become a spiritual, totally nature connected person, but there's something happens.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the other thing too is like we're all on our journey of reconnection in different places. Like there's, you know, like I lived for 3 years in the wilderness and even, like where do your clothes come from? Wearing natural materials or things that are dyed with plants, or like where does your food come from? Does it come from plastic? Do you grow it on the land? Do you forage it? Where does your medicine come from? Do you make it? And that's kind of like where I started to get more at some point. I feel like forest bathing was like it's almost like 101. It's like, and it's still a basic everyday practice that is powerful, but for me, it started to be like, I needed to go deeper in myself. And also this feeling of like, you can have these healing experiences in nature, but at some point, like you have to keep going and like, the more like as you work to heal nature, nature heals you. Um, so it's not just about like having this experience, it's about like, what do you do with it then?
Wow. Wow. So yeah, that's very powerful. What do you do with it then? And picking up the word reciprocity, it is an act of this back and forth, that we are going to nature to heal, but in some way we're also healing nature
Mhm.
by,
Mhm.
I think, by simply being aware of the beings of nature and acknowledging their presence and showing reverence and respect.
Mhm.
That goes a long way to healing. I guess healing anybody, right? All those things are
Exactly.
really what we all crave: acknowledgement, respect, reverence.
Presence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as we're wrapping up, Julia, really, really love this talk with you and hearing your experiences. Is there any last things you'd like to share?
Um, no, this has been rich. Yeah, and thank thank you. And like like I mentioned, it's journey of reconnection and it's a journey of growth, continual growth. And I think one part, I've always for a while like would judge myself of like haven't figured it all out yet or always like still learning, still growing. And then like that's actually just the way of someone who is that's what nature is, right? Evolving, growing, adapting, resilient, changing. Um, but yeah, it's like I mentioned that I you know, have had this big opening and redirection and I'm definitely still in the things take time to emerge also. But I do feel like this next phase of work is like, I'm just like praying that it is in this like alignment with what we talked about and like, my path and being able to serve and heal. And so yeah, I would say like I do have some cool stuff that I've been working on and so if there's like ways that people want to, connect with me, um I
Yes,
would love
please tell
yeah.
them, how can they connect with you?
Yeah. So I have like my personal website is Julia Oliansky, OLIANSKY.com. And forestbathing.club for forest bathing. And I've really shifted forest bathing experiences to offer more like workshops. Like I said, like going kind of deeper, like, yeah, like there's still forest bath, but like doing some more deeper work. And yeah, the hype, heal yourself, people earth. And it's just like all of these um lots of new growth, it feels like.
Like a tree.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. You're so inspiring. And I just love this story you shared about the sweat lodge and the birthing. And we're just on like you said, we're just at the beginning of this birthing process for you. So I really look forward to see what will manifest out of this birth, um, into the world. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Julia. And I just want to say, please, all of you who are watching or listening, I would love to hear your comments below. Please reach out, please subscribe, share, like, and contact Julia. I'll have all of her links below.
Amazing.
Great. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you for being a part of the Enchanted Earth podcast. Comment below, share, and most of all, please hit the subscribe button so that you'll hear when we publish another inspiring episode. You can visit us at luminous-spaces.com for more information on our online courses, retreats, and offerings. Thank you and have a magical day.